This is part one of my mini ITX budget build. So I have to split these up into parts because TikTok only allows a certain time limit on videos. So I do apologize, guys. Right now I'm just removing the top panel of the Metalfish S3 5-liter case. Now the reason why I am removing the top panel is because I need to scope out this 80mm fan. Unfortunately, Metalfish S3 do not include the fan anymore, which is a bummer, and I only have 92mm fans available. So I wanted to see if I could actually put in a 92mm fan, but I couldn't. So I ordered this 80mm fan off AliExpress, and it's going to be arriving next week, hopefully, but it's just another delay. So Metalfish S3, can you please include the 80mm fan? It really is great. Anyway, this is the Flex PSU that I'll be installing right now. I'm going to remove the plastic wrap, and this is what it looks like. You can fit it in the palm of your hand, and it is a beautiful little black thing. I love it. So I'm just putting that in place at the bottom of the case and lining up the back of the Flex PSU. Now the good thing is that with this build, the Metalfish guys give you all of these screws. So you have an abundance of screws for the build, and right now I am looking for the big case screws to mount the back of the Flex PSU onto the case. Now I do find I have a lot of spare screws at the end of my builds, so I actually went to Bunnings and got this cool case thing, and now it stores all of my screws. FYI, you guys should get it. Okay, I've picked the right screws, so now it is time to orientate the case so I can screw these Flex PSU screws in. Now, the interesting thing is the case is a 5-liter case, so it is a lot smaller than your average case, and these screws are actually like big. They look big on the small size case. Now, aesthetically, it doesn't look that nice, to be honest, having these like big screws. So I do hope in future they will make like more smaller screws for these 5-liter cases that they sell. But to be honest, OEM screws are a lot more affordable than trying to make some like smaller screws for customers. So the next step is to put all the PSU plugs in that I need. And in this build, I am actually going to be using all of the slots because I will be using an SSD. This is an 1151 socket motherboard. So I don't even think there's many NVMe motherboards in the 1151 range. Well, probably not this one because it's like a budget one. So I'm just going to be like using the SSD. So I need a power plug for that too. And I've got your standard 24 pin, a little 4 pin for the motherboard CPU as well, and the 8 pin for the Intel Arc A380 graphics card. And here goes the end result. I've got all the plugs ready to go, and I'm ready to install the motherboard now. So in goes the included IO shield. I always look for IO shields when I am buying cheap motherboards on eBay. It sucks when you receive a motherboard that does not have an IO shield. The reason why I have this obsession with IO shields is that it just makes the build look more complete. I know you don't need IO shields, but I feel like if I was to pick up a PC and show my mates, for example, and there was no IO shield, it would pretty much bring up a few questions. So it's just to avoid any sort of weird occurrences of customer not being happy scenario vibes. So, IO shield in place. Now it's time to slot that motherboard in place here. Now, I pre-plugged in the front switches on the front because I have learned my lesson in terms of trying to like plug those front panel plugs in while the motherboard is screwed in. It can be done, but it's pretty hard. So I pre-do it now and it makes things a lot easier. So I am just lining up the screws here and making sure the motherboard slots into that I/O shield correctly, so I do have the right spacing and that sort of thing. And in goes the motherboard screws. Now goes the 24-pin plug. Every time I insert these plugs in, I always have trouble with clicking them. You really have to give it a fair bit of force to actually get that click sound. So bear with me, guys. I'm just going to really push this one down and triple check, because I have put machines together in the past and it just wouldn't boot, and it just came down to the 24-pin not being put in properly. So I'm just being quite thorough here, guys. Now this motherboard actually takes a 4-pin CPU power connector, so no need for the 8-pin. I will be cable tying that down and everything, but I do have that in place now. In goes the front USB cable. I really need to be careful with these front USB cables. They are prone to break on the motherboard PCB if you wiggle them too much. It's happened to me before. It's a really annoying thing, to be honest. To note, I did actually end up removing the motherboard again so I can fit the PCI Express extension, and I managed to slot that in right there, as you can see. And this is the end result. Part 2 will be installing the graphics card and doing cable management.